Welcome to this very special edition of the KJ Masterclass Live, the show which ensures that you profit from your time spent here with experts, either through their industry insights, information, or simply learning from them. And today we have Larry Onan, expert in nonprofit leadership and fund development, and an author. Welcome to the show, Larry.
Thank you. Welcome. So good to be with you this morning.
You are welcome. Welcome to the show, Larry. Welcome to India in this online form. And I'm sure not just in India, but a lot of people across the globe will benefit from what we are going to talk right now. We'll be talking about mastering intentional living for purpose and abundance. But before we come to this, let's understand a bit about your journey, a lot of things that you have done in so many years. So let people understand who they are listening to.
Well, AJ, I was born and raised in Western Colorado in the middle of the United States and went to the University of Colorado where I intended to be a theater arts major and go into theater. I love that particular subject. But during that process, I really felt led that I should go a different direction. And that's what led me out of the theater and into nonprofit world of leadership and developing people and helping partners, financial partners, be successful and confident in their spiritual view of life. So I've spent over 50 years working with nonprofits, with partners that give generously, and with teams of people that try to help these nonprofit ministries be successful. So I've had a lot of experience in a lot of different ways over the years, but it all started back when I was born and raised in that little part of Colorado where I didn't even know the rest of the world existed out there. Ironically, during my senior year in college, I met a guy from India, from Madras, India, and ended up being significantly involved in his life for the next 4 or 5 years as he was working in Madras and I was working in University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia. So I have a little bit of knowledge of India, but not as much as I would like to. I've never been actually put my feet in the country yet.
Right, Larry. But you are reaching now to many people through this podcast, and hopefully,
well, I've had numerous friends in and out of India over the years. So thank you very much for the opportunity to sharing a little bit about life and leadership with you.
Absolutely, Larry. So being into this non-profit work for many years, Larry, I want to understand about intentional living from you. Why is it that people who are in problems continue to be in problems in spite of so many people who are trying to help them? Is it that they after some time it all becomes uh, a sort of an industry for many people, and that
Well, I think
this sort of things, I want to understand this a bit more in from your experience. Maybe my experience is not the same as yours, and that is where, but your experience matters, because then we'll come to the deeper part of intentional living. Why is it that people are not able to come out of the problems that they have been getting help for so many years?
Well, I've got a very God perspective on this, AJ, in the sense that
Right.
I believe that we were created with a purpose, and that purpose was to partly be a steward of God's resources. But I think many people are caught in serving themselves, and when you start serving yourself, you get very disappointed in the outcome. And it would probably be called selfishness in some respects. In other words, what can I do to gain myself? What can I do to take somebody else down? What can I do to survive today because my neighbor or my friend next door maybe needs something, but I'm just too busy. So I think when we become self-centered in everything we do, we become pretty miserable creatures. And then it becomes a game to see how I can get ahead of you and do better than you, one up, so to speak, as we would say in some cultures. So my experience over the years is helping people find that they don't have to be self-centered, but they can start to be generous in their own way. And they need to understand what that all means for them to really make that a long-term objective. But I found many people that when they become self-serving, and looking out for number one themselves, they really end up being quite miserable, defeated, fearful, competitive. And that's not the way we were designed to live. That was not the plan in the first place.
Right. That was not the plan in the first place. So how does help come to people? Is it then when you talk about intentional living, then they have to make it a focus to better their lives rather than depending on someone else or organizations?
Well, I
How
think
does
there's
it
two
work?
parts to that. One of them is bettering themselves, but the word intentional, I wrote a book called Intentional Living and Giving. And while living and giving sounds like a nice idea, I think the word intentional is very important to this process, because I find that even this last weekend, I was with a number of people and I met a few there that were just kind of, I would say they were just going from one idea to the next. They really were not disciplined in their life. Intentionality is going to be very important to this process. And if you're not waking up thinking about what is my responsibility, both to man and to God, what is my role in this world that I was born and raised into, I was put here for a purpose. If I'm not going to be intentional in finding that, I'm going to end up being very miserable, because I'm going to be trying to go someplace with no map. And I really am trying to help people get on a map that takes them to a destiny that they would really appreciate. And I think many people today are just wandering from one experience to the next. It's impulsive living and giving rather than intentional living and giving. And there's no reason to live that way. But many times, if you don't have the right principles in mind, you're going to end up just floundering in life. And you're going to go from one experience to the next experience to the next. You're going to be angry with everybody around you because you don't know why you're there and why they're there. I'm just trying to help people do a mid-course correction, so to speak, and do this more effectively. And intentional living is what I'm going to be emphasizing in what I do with people. I'm just trying to help people become that.
Right, Larry. So, from a common person's perspective, what is this intentional living? People keep talking, people keep hearing about this particular. What is if for a simple person who is living in any corner of the world, how should they, or how can they understand this intentional living part for themselves?
Well, I think to me, it's a spiritual issue in the hearts of people. You've got to recognize that we were not created by accident. We were created for a purpose. Many people don't know what their purpose is. I remember some years ago, I was with a lady. Her husband actually was a pastor for many, many years. And she was probably in her early 60s. And she had tears in her eyes. And she said, I know many people that since they have a purpose, but in all my life, I've never figured out what my purpose is. And life has been pretty miserable because I've been following other people's purposes. And I thought how sad it was to be at the early 60s in age. Her husband, I think, had retired already, but she did not know in all the years that she was there why she was there. And I felt like, there's no reason to live that way if you just know where to go find the answers. So what I'm trying to do here in my life is to help people get that answer. I believe that it's a God-focused perspective. In other words, why was I created in the first place? That's the bigger picture. And if I know why I'm created, and in my opinion, we are created to be stewards of the person that created us. So a steward is not a person that gives money, although that's one thing a person could do. But
Right.
a steward is one who is managing the affairs of somebody else. That's what the responsibility is of a steward. So if you think of a steward in business, it's the person usually managing the management, the money, the process of doing things, not that he owns it, but that he is managing it on behalf of the owner. And if I'm going to be giving myself to helping make that owner successful, then my stewardship is going to be really good because I want him to be successful, and he will therefore also help me be successful. But I'm doing it because I recognize who owns it. It's not that I own it. In my life, I have a house and I have a car and I have clothes. Those are 3 common things that I have in my possession. But I recognized many, many years ago that I don't really own a house. I don't really own a car, and I don't own my clothes. I'm entrusted to use those things because it's been provided me by my maker. So when I recognize who's in charge, I start to refocus my attention on, okay, how can I be successful in doing my job? I'm a Christian perspective, so I go back to the book of Genesis. It's one of the early books of the Old Testament. And God made the story there is Adam and Eve. We've all heard the story, but the very story is very interesting. In chapter 2 of Genesis, it says that God put Adam and Eve in a garden. Now, the garden was as big as a small state in India, so it's not a small place. It wasn't the backyard version of what we call a garden today around the world. But Adam and Eve were put there to take care of something. And God's basic instruction to him is, Adam, I've created you to take care of my stuff. Right. And when Adam was taking care of God's stuff and doing his job faithfully, God was pleased with him, and they had a personal relationship. It says in Scripture that God came and walked with Adam in the evening of the day to find out how things were going. That's relational capital. Now, they did blow it. Chapter 3 talks about the disaster that created problems that we have in the world today. But it was really based on the sound principle that this is my stuff, and I'm giving you the privilege of using everything I've got, and then I want you to tell me how you're doing with it. So it's a perspective that who owns this thing is not me. Whatever I'm doing today is because I've been placed here to do it with a purpose. And if I can help people get their purpose squared away, I think you're going to find a lot more people thriving in life rather than being self-centered and frustrated and fearful and confused.
Right, Larry. So how do I get to my true purpose? For example, in today's time, there are so many strings which are pulling you in their direction. For example, again, when we talk of non-profit and profit, my purpose is to serve people, but I don't get a job, and I get a job in a for-profit organization, and they are making profit. I want to serve people, but they are serving themselves. Their purpose is profit for themselves. How do I find my purpose in a situation like this, in so many situations of our lives like this? Is it possible to go with my purpose, or is it only possible that I go with other people's purpose and I lose my purpose? How do I find my real purpose then?
Well, if I find a person that's living in, say working in a company, and it would be just a secular business that's making profitability, I can still understand that my purpose for being there today is not really to serve the company, but I'm serving my maker. And then I need to say, okay, now as long as I'm here doing this job, I'm going to do it faithfully as if I was serving the one that made me. And so there's a perspective there of I don't work for that company. I've been assigned to work for this company by my creator. And so it starts with a perspective of life, I believe, and that's what we're talking about here. Now, there are some principles behind how you're successful in doing that. One of them is recognizing who owns you. The second one is recognizing that the one that owns you wants you to be a giver, not a taker. Now, our culture is full of taking. How can I get ahead? How can I take an advantage of somebody else? That's not the way we were created. God said he wanted us to give hilariously or give cheerfully. The word in the English is cheerful, but if you go back to the Greek of that particular word, when it was outlined by the Apostle Paul in the first century, he said God wants us to be cheerful givers. What does that mean? Well, cheerful in the Greek is a word that means hilaros. It's hilaros. That's the word. Hilaros is the word definition is to cause to shine like the sun. Now, the sun is a ball of fire, and I'm benefiting from the sun today. It's just coming up in my part of the world. It gives me heat. It gives me light. It gives the whole environment it'll exist in is because the sun's perfect heat on my process. But the word means to cause to shine like the sun, hilaros. Okay, what we're saying is that God wants me to give as the way I was created the scripture says that he was a giver. And he wants me to give like he gives. That's part of our nature, is to give. So instead of us thinking, I've got to get it myself, I've got to take it, it's all mine, I've got to figure out how to get ahead, the Spirit has got to be saying, how do I use what I've been entrusted with to help the lives of other people? So it is living and giving that makes life enjoyable and fun and thriving. But it's a process of understanding that. Now, along with that process, we've got to learn how to give to one another. We've got to know how to ask. A few weeks ago, I was in a meeting with a bunch of men, and it was a breakfast. There was about 30 to 40 men there. And at the end of the meeting, about 25 of the men got up and left, 25 to 30, and they all said goodbye. They were having a great time. And 3 people stayed in the meeting and were doing all the cleanup. Now, it was interesting that there were 30 people there that could have helped, but nobody was asked. So they all walked away. We are pretty dense creatures, but if somebody says, Larry, could you help me do X? Then I need to respond and decide, maybe I can, maybe I can't. You know, I had an email yesterday from a guy who says, Larry, I'd like to talk to you. Could we talk in the next week? He says, we haven't talked in 10 years. Well, my response was, because you wrote and asked me, by all means, let's talk. Let's set an appointment. So in a couple of days, I'm having a phone call with a guy I haven't talked to in over a decade. But I'm having the call because he initiated the ask. And I was able to respond, and I'm looking forward to talking to him. He wasn't in my frame of reference at this point, but because he had received my book in the mail through another source, and he was halfway through it, he said, we have not talked in so long. I need to catch up with you and find out what's going on in your life. Could we talk? That was asking. Now, he could also go to God in prayer and talk to God about things, but it's not just a spiritual thing. It's helping each other, doing together, life together in community. So that's asking, and that's receiving from others, and that's joyfully accepting somebody else's encouragement by what they give to me. It allows me to turn around and do something to either them or to somebody else, because as I receive from others, I'm able to give more to others. It's not about me getting it all. It's about how can I receive so I can give, so I can receive again, so I can give again. It's a spirit of asking and responding and being free to help others meet their needs. So it's a cycle. It's not a strategy to get rich. I think many times you've heard it in some very, very disconcerting theologies that are out there around the world today, is you give to get. If you give a little bit here, you're going to make a lot of money here. Well, that may be partly true, but that's not the outline of what we're supposed to be doing. We're supposed to be giving, and as we give, we receive, which what allows us to do? Give again. The more you give, the more you're going to receive. It is not for me, it's for the benefit of others. Now, in the New Testament, there's a lot that talks about farming. Probably the best instructions on farming come in the New Testament with the Apostle Paul. And he talked about the principles of the harvest, how a farmer goes about doing his job. I've got to expect that as a result of my hard labor, I'm going to see an outcome. That is not because I'm selfish, it's because the law of the harvest says when you plant and care and nurture, you're going to have a harvest. And that harvest is going to bless you, but it's going to bless many other people. I don't plant an ear of corn to get one ear of corn. I plant corn so I'll have a harvest of corn. I can not only enjoy it, but I have the ability now to influence and help others with the benefit of the law of the harvest. And then I really believe that the more we give, the more we're going to receive. But it's not so that I can get rich or I can have more. It's just that I am entrusted by the owner to distribute more. So life can be really full of adventure when you realize that today, I woke up this morning saying, God, what do you want me to do today? And how can I be effective in helping somebody else today? Now, that was just my, 1 second prayer as I got out of bed today. It wasn't that I'm saying, how can I manipulate some people to do what they don't want to do? It's how can I be blessing to somebody else? I think if we were looking to helping others more, and we were, even if we don't have much, there's something to help. There's over 100 ways people can give and never give a dime of money, believe it or not. There's encouragement, there's a listening ear, there's the human contact of showing caring. All of those things are expressions of giving. And only one of maybe 100 things is called what most people think of as giving. And they talk about, well, we want you to give. They're really saying we want your money. Well, that may be what they want, but maybe my time and my influence or my expertise is going to be more helpful to somebody by far than what I could give them financially. And so there is a process to it. But I believe we're made to be healthy distributors of resources that God entrusts to us. And I call it in my book that I wrote, Authorized Wealth Distributor. Distributing God's wealth and resources on demand where the need is there and where I can help fulfill the need. So that is what an authorized wealth distributor is. But I've worked with many, many very successful people in business over the years, because in my occupation, I was a consultant to nonprofit organizations, mostly in helping them raise the resources that they needed to run their nonprofits. And so not only was I working with executives and boards and leadership in an organization, but many, many times I was working with the financial partners that made the organizations possible. And I was always excited to help a partner understand the dynamics of how critically important he was to the mission. Many organizations want to get money from somebody so they can go do something else. Well, when I first started, that's the way I saw it. It was called fundraising. I'll get something from you and I'll take it and I'll go do something else. When I started to understand the dynamics of this whole subject of stewardship, I realized that the person giving is equally involved in what the mission is as to the person that's implementing the mission. So it's not that one is less than something. They are equal partners because one has the ability to give resources and expertise. The other one has the ability to implement a program. They may have compassion. They may have strategies on how to feed the hungry or meet the needs in a community in a humanitarian way. They may be into education and they're really good at running schools and helping kids. I chair a board of schools in the Philippines for preschoolers that would never have a chance of ever going to preschool. But I have families that are sponsoring entire classrooms of kids. Now, 15, 16 kids is the size of the classroom in the Philippines. So we can have 16 kids with one teacher and one aide. It costs in US dollars about $35 a month for that child to go through school. And that includes all of his education. It includes the teacher, includes the aide, includes the classroom, it includes the materials they use, it includes snacks, it includes the little uniforms they wear. What I'm doing is I'm helping partners own classrooms. We got 5 of our schools that are fully sponsored by one family. That one family is making sure that these kids get a jump start in life. And who's more important, the teacher or the funding resources? They're equal. The teacher knows how to do her job. The financial resources, which in some cases are coming from other kinds of business, are the ones that are underwriting the teacher's ability to help these kids get a jump start in life. Now, they're equally involved together. They're doing this. They're joining hands as partners. And I really believe that that's a role we have together. Can I come along with somebody else, take their hand, and together we are successful because we're doing it as partners. So it is not because I'm in secular business and I make money and I like a nonprofit that happens to be helping educate or help the homeless or do whatever ministry that might be there. It's that I've been empowered by God to use my resources and influence to help somebody else do their job. And I'm equally involved in their job. So
Right.
I go to work every day knowing that, I've got people all around the world that I'm helping in a variety of ways. And that gives me hope, and that gives me a thriving perspective on life because I'm doing what I was called to do.
Right, Larry. Right. So let's learn a bit from your book, Intentional Living and Giving. How have you dealt this topic in your book? And there you have added from living. Also, you have used the word called giving.
Well, I was probably doing what I call Christian ministry for 6 to 10 years. And I was one time in a meeting, AJ. I was not in a situation where I was just invited because I've been reasonably successful in doing some new things that had never been done before. But I was a nobody in this room. I was not a leader. I just was sitting there listening. And the organization I was with was global. It had ministries in 192 countries of the world. And they were wanting to raise significant resources. We had ministries across all of Asia, Latin America, across Africa and Europe. We were every place. And I was sitting there thinking, what in the world am I doing here? And the consultants that were leading the meeting said, if we do not start to help people teach a lifestyle of stewardship, we're going to create competition as we raise money rather than blessing. And we really think that this organization should create a ministry of helping people understand that. Well, the ministry was not wanting to start a new outreach of teaching. And there was some argument and discussions going on. And somebody in the room said, well, Larry's been pretty successful in doing some things. Let's just assign that task over to Larry and let him figure out what lifestyle stewardship is. And I wrote down on a piece of paper, AJ, okay, figure out what lifestyle stewardship, and it's in the bottom of the page. I remember distinctly writing, and you have the freedom to fail. Now, I'd been coached that way because the people that were working with me had said, Larry, if you don't step in and try things, you don't know if it's going to work. You always have the freedom to fail. If it doesn't work, you can start over and do something differently. It's not failure is bad. Failure is part of our learning experience. Well, I wrote that down, and I'm very responsible in terms of how I think. So about 2 or 3 weeks later, I thought, how am I going to start ever figuring this out? And I started a journey with a half a dozen other guys that were working for me. I had started a fund development office with 2 people, myself and another guy. And 10 years later, I had 125 people in 7 departments. And so I took the leaders of the department that I was running, and I said, we've got to figure this out because this could be a game changer for us and everybody else. And I got into the subject that we're dealing with today way, way back and started teaching others. When we started teaching others, we saw light bulbs go on in their brains, that there was a purpose for people being here that was different than they thought it was. I remember one guy that had retired. He wanted to go into full-time volunteer work for a nonprofit organization. And he was all excited. He had sold his business. He'd come to this conference. I was teaching the principles that you would find in the book. And at the end of the 4 or 5 hours of that particular seminar run, he said, Larry, I'm making a major decision. I'm not retiring. I'm going to go back into business. And he said, I know I'm good at making resources happen. I'm good at organizing. I'm good at marketing. I know I've been gifted in those things, and that's what I'm supposed to be doing. And he went back and started a whole new business. Over the next 10 years, he probably gave 2 to 3 million US dollars away from that business and the profits. He sold the business, and then he retired a second time and said, now I'm going to spend the next 4 or 5 years doing what I was thinking I'd like to do earlier. And he enjoyed retirement and doing a third ministry assignment, so to speak, of helping other people do what he had done. Now, why was that? It was because he realized his gifting was in an area, and once he understood the principles behind using the gifting, he said, I would be wrong in just going out on my selfishness and wanting to go into something fun. Now, he enjoyed his business, don't get me wrong, but he was enjoying the fact because he was doing what God created him to do. And he was very successful on it. I've seen many people actually blossom in their lives when they realize the significant impact they can have. They're living day to day, distributing God's wealth and resources that have been put in their hands. And I'm not talking, it's a widow's mite. When you watch the widow's mite, there was an old story in the New Testament. Jesus was watching people come in and out of the temple in Jerusalem. And the lady came in and gave 2 pennies. She gave all that she had. And he stopped and talked to his disciples. She said, she's given more than anybody else because she gave it all. So it's not about how much you've got. It's about what you do with what you've got. And I think that's the real critical part, is how am I called to be a fulfilled person? Now, the book itself, AJ, I wrote it, this book that came out in June. The reason I put it together is I know that many people, especially younger adults, say under 40, this is a brand new concept to them. They've not heard this kind of content. And so I wrote the book to help the younger generation become attached to the principles of dynamic giving and becoming authorized wealth distributors. So the book is in 2 sections. The first section is what you'd call in the Christian world, we call it biblical theology. In other words, what is the principles behind being what God wants us to be? And I unpack the 5 key principles and the applications of how that works. The second half of the book is, okay, now that you understand who you are, here are 10 chapters that are going to help you practically implement this in your life. So it's not only the how to, but it's also what you do with it. And I've got cautions, I've got helps in there, I've got outlines that help people do that. But I'm just, the book is just to help people do what God really leads them to do. I want to free people up to do that. And so the book itself, it's available wherever bookstores want to carry it, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, or any book outlet that you would have in India or across Asia can get the book. It's now available. All you got to do is go online and you'll find Intentional Living and Giving, and you can pick it up that way. So I'm just trying to help people understand how they can really become thrivers rather than defeaters.
Right, Larry. So, for those people who would like to connect with you, what's the best way for them to do so?
Well, if they want to connect with me, they can. I have a website called larryonan.com. My name looks Irish, but in the culture of the computers, you can't put an apostrophe in. So it's LARRYONAN.com. That's where the book is located. Tells you a little bit more about the book. Anybody could email me at larryonan.com. I'm glad to interact and respond when I get emails like that. I'm here. I just want to help people. I've had a very good 50 years of consulting and working. I'm healthy and I'm still doing it. But if I can help anybody today take the step in becoming a thriver and becoming purpose-driven in their life, I know that being an effective steward, an authorized wealth distributor, is very, very central to their sense of success. And they can be very intentional in their living and their giving all the time.
Wonderful. With this, it's a wrap on this very special edition of the KAJ Masterclass Live. Thank you so much indeed for joining us.
Thank you.